I've compared AMD's two highest core count Zen 4 processors in 25 games and applications to help you decide which to pick. The main differences in specs are seen in the core and thread counts. Compared to the 7900X, the higher tier 7950X has 4 additional cores and 8 extra threads. The 7950X also has a slightly higher maximum boost clock speed, as well as more L1 and L2 cache. As for price difference, right now the 7900X is available for $550 while the 7950X costs an extra $150 more at $700, or 27% more money. To find out if the 7950X is worth paying more for, I've tested both CPUs in this system, so the exact same hardware for both chips. Literally all that's changing between tests is the processor. Just before the 25 games, let's start out with Cinebench R23, as it's an easy way to get a general idea of where single and multi-threaded performance are at. I've got the 7900X below the 7950X, and we can see that the extra cores and threads with the 7950X are giving it a 31% higher multi-core score. The 7950X was also ahead when it came to single-core score, but the gap is much smaller, with the 7950X scoring just 1% higher than the 7900X. Both processors were running at about the same clock speeds during this test at above 5 GHz over all cores. Technically, the 7950X has a higher max boost clock of 5.7 GHz, but those higher speeds are only seen in single-threaded tests. The 7950X needs 17% more power in order to achieve its 31% performance boost. So from a performance per watt perspective, the 7950X ends up being more power efficient in this heavily multi-threaded workload. Yeah, the 7950X uses more power, but you're able to get more performance out of that power with it. More power means more heat. The 7950X was running around 4 degrees Celsius warmer compared to the 7900X, but according to AMD, this isn't a problem and is considered normal behavior. Their Zen 4 processors are designed to run up to 95 degrees Celsius 24/7 without risk of damage or deterioration. If you're super paranoid about it though, you could always enable eco mode. This results in the 7950X using less power than the 7900X while still offering better multi-core performance, which gives the 7950X an even better performance per watt score. Not to mention, the temperatures of both are now far cooler, with the 7950X running cooler. The 7950X hits lower clock speeds now, but it makes up for this by having more cores. Different applications do perform differently though, so just before we get into those 25 games, let's find out what both processors can do in more workloads. Blender was tested with the OpenData benchmark. This test relies on multi-core performance, and like Cinebench, there are some nice gains with the 7950X's extra cores, which was scoring around 32% higher compared to the 7900X. The V-Ray and Corona benchmarks also use the processor to render out a scene, and along with Blender and Cinebench, had some of the biggest performance gains on the 7950X out of all applications tested, as rendering workloads love more cores and threads. Linux kernel compilation was tested under Ubuntu 22.04, whereas all other tests were done with Windows 11. The 7950X was 28% faster in this workload, likely thanks to the additional cores, which also have extra cache, as that's something that benefits compilation. LLVM compilation is the last test I've run under Linux, and the performance difference was a bit smaller here, with the 7950X being 16% faster compared to the 7900X. Handbrake was used to convert one of my 4K 60fps review videos to 1080p H.265. Lower times are better here too, but the 7950X was only 10% faster in this one. The gap continues to get smaller in Adobe Premiere. I've used the Puget Systems benchmark, which tests things like video exporting, playback, and more, and the 7950X was scoring 9% higher compared to the 7900X. DaVinci Resolve is another video editing program, though the 7950X only had a 5% lead in this one. Generally, I've found this test to benefit more from more GPU power, so you might be better off using your budget on a better GPU rather than top-tier CPU. The differences in Adobe Photoshop were even smaller. I've found that this test generally likes having more single-core performance, and as we saw in Cinebench earlier, the 7950X was only 1% better in that regard. Here in Photoshop, the 7950X just had a 3% lead over the 7900X. The differences in Microsoft Office were extremely small, with the 7950X only scoring a little higher. But let's be real, either of these are more than overkill for office work anyway. 7-zip was used to test compression and decompression. The 7950X was 32% ahead when it came to decompression and 16% ahead for compression. The differences in AES encryption and decryption, on the other hand, were basically nothing. Geekbench tests a bunch of various workloads, and like Cinebench earlier, the difference in single-core scores was extremely small. The 7950X was scoring 19% higher in multi-core thanks to its additional threads. On average, out of all applications tested, the higher tier and more expensive 7950X was 15% faster in these specific workloads. Of course, this number alone doesn't mean much, as I've got a random combination of both single and multi-threaded workloads, but it gives you an idea of what sort of an overall improvement can be expected by spending the extra $150 on the 7950X. Rendering workloads in particular seem to be the best use case for the extra cores. So what about gaming? I've also tested both processors in 25 games at 1080p, 1440p, and 4K resolutions to find out all the differences. Alright, normally I'd pick the 10 most interesting game graphs and talk through the differences, but the fact is, the performance differences are so small in most of these games that there really isn't any point in doing that. It would just be a waste of time. So we're instead going to just quickly skip through the results of all 25 games that I've tested at 3 different resolutions, so that we can spend our time talking about more important things. Feel free to pause the video if you want a closer look at any of these 25 games. On average, over all 25 games tested, at 1080p, the higher tier Ryzen 9 7950X was actually slightly slower compared to the 7900X, though it's such a small difference and well within the margin of error range. Games like Rainbow Six Extraction and Total War Warhammer 3 were notably better with the 7900X, while others like Halo, Spider-Man, and Tomb Raider had a lead on the 7950X. Stepping up to the higher 1440p resolution, and on average, we're still looking at no real difference between the two CPUs. Generally, there's less of a difference between CPUs at higher resolutions, as most games start to become more GPU bound. The processor difference matters less. This continues at 4K. We can now see that 21 of our 25 games had around a 1% increase or decrease with the different CPUs. So CPU choice between these two really doesn't matter if your goal is 4K gaming. This becomes abundantly clear when we take the average frame rates from all 25 games tested. There's like a 1 FPS or so difference between them, which is basically nothing in practice. Considering the 7950X is an extra $150 more expensive compared to the 7900X, it should come as no surprise to see that the 7900X is offering better value when it comes to gaming at all 3 resolutions tested. The FPS in most games is quite close, so you might as well just save the money and get the 7900X if gaming is the focus. The extra budget would be better spent on a higher GPU. Both processors basically offer similar value in terms of multi-core performance, with the 7950X doing a little better. So basically, if you're doing productivity workloads that would benefit from more cores like rendering, it could be worth spending more on the 7950X. So basically, to summarize, if gaming is your focus, it's not worth spending the extra $150 to get the 7950X over the 7900X. But if you are getting the 7950X for some other reason anyway, then rest assured that it will game just as well as the 7900X in most cases. Honestly, if gaming is the focus, most people would probably be just fine with either the 7600X or 7700X, which are much cheaper. The Ryzen 9 processors just seem better suited to people that do actually need more cores and threads, and generally speaking, that's just not gamers. Don't get me wrong, there's definitely an argument for Ryzen 9 if you are gaming and doing a bunch of other things at the same time, like streaming. But yeah, for someone that just wants to play games on a budget, Ryzen 5 and Ryzen 7 are better options. Most games just aren't going to see a big performance boost with 12 or 16 cores. 6 and 8 are honestly fine. There are more important things when it comes to gaming, like say IPC, clock speeds, and cache. Now the 7950X would be ideal for people who run multi-core workloads where time is money and need the best performance available. In that case, it might be worth spending the 27% more money to get an up to 32% performance boost in some multi-core workloads. Now, Intel's Core i9-13900K is actually cheaper than AMD's Ryzen 9 7950X, and it outperforms it in many workloads too. So check out this comparison before you buy the 7950X. The 13900K i3 isn't a magical silver bullet though. Intel's platform has less upgradability compared to AM5 for example, so make sure you check out that one next before buying your next CPU.